Ladies and gentlemen, warm welcome from Berlin, Germany, and another Airline Crewing Enigma guest speaker presentation from Peter Reynolds. Peter and I, we know each other since more than 7 years. It was always very delightful to visit him and his airline in Dubai, a fantastic network operations center. We had also fantastic sessions at the Ops 2020 in Dubai and in Berlin. And I'm very glad that I could win him as a speaker because he has a wealth of experience. So by teasing him for the session, he told me, oh, I'm now feeling very old because more than 30 years of experience. And today he's talking about the evolution of crew management. And so I'm going to help you. So if you have a question, please raise your hand and I will call you in because he's certainly focusing on his presentation. And yeah, stage is yours, Peter.
Thank you, Daniel. Thank you for that introduction. When we were talking about this, Daniel said that refers to me as mature, but dinosaur is probably closer. I've been in the industry for, as Daniel said, over 30 years. I started out at a medium-sized short-haul airline, full service in the UK. I went to a small charter airline. I went back to a low-cost airline. I then did a couple of years consulting before a cargo airline, and then I ended up where I am now at Emirates. I'm going to give a very, very simple presentation because I think it's more about what I'm saying than actually what's the content of the presentation. And as Daniel said, I'm quite happy to take your questions as we go through, or we can have a question and answer session at the end of it. So back in 1991, when I started with my first airline, we all built rosters by hand. This is what a roster looked like, basically on A3. And you would squeeze as many crew members in as you possibly could. All of the information was manually transferred from one week to the next. And we did it with the tools of the trade, which were a pencil sharpener, a rubber. If you were very, very rich or your boss liked you a lot, you could actually get one of these, which is a pop-up pencil. We still see them around today. In certain places. In fact, I still see some of the older staff around using a pencil and a piece of paper to do their work. When I moved to my second airline, I was introduced to these. I don't know if anybody's aware of what these are, but these are the infamous yellow stickers, which could take a beautifully built roster and turn it into a paper mache map of the Alps. You stuck the sticker on, you wrote the new duty on, and you kept going until they reached the ceiling and you needed a chair to look at them. And the final tool of the trade we have, and I don't know if anybody's aware of what this is, but this is a Rolodex. A Rolodex was what we used instead of computerized telephone systems. These were the days before mobile phones existed, where you wrote down the telephone number of the person and you flicked through to try and find exactly who they were and where to contact them. The days of mobile phones, as I said, didn't exist. If some crew had pages, but most people had to sit beside the phone and wait for the phone to ring when they were on standby. Computerized rostering systems, well, there were some around. Some of the bigger airlines, sorry, there's an echo. Some of the bigger airlines. Sorry, my apologies. I'm just clicking through because I've got a horrible echo there. Okay, let me put it back into presentation. But this was a computer. This was what we used back in the day, Windows 3.1. A very, very slow system. But if you had a good day in the office, then this was how you measured your success. Certain larger airlines, as I was saying, had some sort of rostering system. I know the UK's flag carrier was using Carmen
Peter,
back in the day.
Are you sharing your screen? Because I don't see your screen anymore.
Yes, I thought I was. Sorry, Daniel. Right, give me one sec. Modern technology, eh? Exactly what we're talking about. So yes, this right. You can see now, Daniel.
Yes. More okay. Microsoft Windows 3.1. Oh.
Wow. So yes, these are the computers we used in the day. And on a good day shift or a night shift, a game of solitaire was how you measured your success. As I was saying, some airlines, the flag carrier in the UK, used rostering systems, but they weren't optimization in any way, shape, or form. The actual system just went through and assigned rosters from a bid line book in sequential order, depending on seniority. Leave was done with a huge sheet of paper, normally on the manager's office floor, going manually and assigning them bit by bit. There were systems around, some of the bigger systems, some of the older systems, the Sabres, the AIMS, Rockade, Lufthansa systems were around, but they were very basic. When I started,
but how did you do then, in, let's say, post-mortem analysis, whether the assignment and the rostering were done in a quite optimal way, or did nobody care and you could really play your solitaire, and if it was a good shift or a bad day, nobody cared?
It was, to be perfectly honest, I mean, the rosters were built by a planner would do 200 to 300 rosters, and it would take them the best part of a month to manually write it. Everybody wrote them differently. And it was literally going through with the flying program and assigning crew to a flight as they felt fit. Normally, they would use some sort of pattern, 5 on 2 off, 6 on 3 off, that sort of thing. And with all the union rules and those sort of things around it, when it came to crew management, it was all manual. So the strange thing about it is when we sat in the office, all of the people working on the desk started not requiring glasses. And within 6 months, a year, we all had the same prescription, because your day was spent from looking up at the ops board to looking down at your sheets, and looking up at the ops board to looking down at your sheets as you manually checked. We did a manual cross-check. So from the A3 rosters, you would take 2 weeks and you would check manually. But the big difference was, back in those days, Daniel, you could look at a roster and you could see something was wrong. That was the thing. It wasn't a case of you had to go and count the duties and those sort of things. The art that is being lost today is the art of the crew scheduler being able to look at a screen and go, that doesn't look right. And everybody could. We all had the experience because we had to do it manually. When it came to utilizing crew, the crew with the middle letters of the alphabet were always the happiest, because you had big, thick A3 rosters that you flicked through in alphabetical order. So depending on who was on shift and what you felt like on that day, when you needed a standby, you started from A or you started from Z and you worked your way through. So the happiest people were the L, M, N, because they very rarely got called from standby. You had to do everything in your head as well. That was the thing we did.
So you're telling me that had an influence if people were marrying, who was picking which name from spouse or husband, because the better letter was avoiding any standby duties?
Very possibly. But it was true. You know, people would complain about it. It's not fair. I always get called on my standby. Well, because you're at the front of the roster. And that's the thing. You would if you had time, but it was all done manually. So there was very little time. When you had disruption was big, and there was no system to help you out. I had a day shift where I ended up working all the way through the night to try and crew the next day's program, because everything went all over the place. And it was literally, I was assigning crews to flights as they walked in the next day, because you don't have a computer to say this person's out of hours. You relied on them to ring up and say, I've just finished my duty. What do you want me to do tomorrow? And then you were penciling them in for the flight they had the next day. It was literally, you flew by the seat of your pants a lot of the time. But the core training, I think back then, was so much better than it is today. And that's because we didn't have a computer telling you if something was wrong. So the first thing you learned when you went in was the FTL scheme, which you had to know off by heart. And you had to know the full interpretation of every rule, because crew then are the same as crew today, where they will try and turn things to their advantage and give the impression that they can't do something that they can. And the second thing was you had to learn the schedule. Yeah, you had to know which flight went where, what sort of time of day it was, and how the flights fitted together. Because if you didn't, you wouldn't know whether you were illegally rostering somebody. You had to know that these flights are morning flights, these flights are afternoon flights, because we didn't have times on the rosters. There was nothing on there. All our rosters showed were flight numbers. And so we've gone from, in the 30 years, well, actually a lot less than 30 years, sort of through the our first introduction to some sort of a computer was a very text-based basic rostering system, was back in the mid 1990s, from a UK firm, quite a small UK firm, and I can't even remember the name. I think it was Acrobat or something like that, where all you could see on the screen was two rosters. The issue was it was very difficult to find somebody to replace a crew member when there was sickness or a disruption. The other issue we had was that every time we made a change to the roster, it pinged off a new sheet of their roster. So every time it printed out in the crew room, and we had complaints of crew who went on leave for 2 weeks and came back with a ream of paper stuck in their pigeonhole with all their roster changes they'd had while they'd been away. But things have changed. We introduced our first actual system, and I won't name any companies through this, copyright infringement and those sort of things. But we introduced our first system in 1998, but that was it was a vast improvement on what we had, because the system's telling you when you're doing something illegal, but you still had to have that basic knowledge behind it, because it wouldn't do everything for you. It didn't really have the ability to roster on your behalf. So we still went through the process of building the trips ourselves and manually assigning them and those sort of things and working through. We tried to get it to actually run, but it was still only, and a lot of these systems I've seen, apart from the true optimizers, of which there are probably only a few on the market, the majority of these systems do 85% of the actual rostering, and you pick the rest up yourself. And then they've sort of, it plateaued for probably maybe 10 years. And in the late 2000s, things started to pick up a bit more. And the optimization, I mean, the optimization today is phenomenal compared to what it was back then. I mean, we now have a rostering system that can write 25,000 cabin crew rosters in less than 48 hours. And it optimizes them as well. So we're at that point in time. We have, and this is what I said earlier about the losing the manual ability to read rosters, because you see people on the job actually assigning a flight to somebody and waiting for the alert to come. And if the alert doesn't come, it's okay. The only downside to that is they're computers. They break. Yeah, there is no such thing as an error-free computer system. And it's not that these systems aren't good, they're exceptional. Yeah, I mean, the way the market is advancing is getting mind-boggling, especially with AI, which I'll come onto a bit later. But they still have glitches, they still get bugs. It's a normal thing to happen. So when somebody assigns a flight to a crew member and it doesn't go red, they assume everything's okay. And that's where I think the danger is going forward of the way the industry is. But optimization, I think, is the way we're going towards the future. We're now, with COVID and the downsizing that a lot of the airlines did, we spent a lot of time and effort going into more situational awareness tools to automating manual processes in the past. So if you, I know you shared a picture earlier of the ops room at Emirates, but if you came
in the audience here, Peter, I cannot hear him anymore.
Yeah, I can hear him. Yeah.
Okay, as long as people can hear me. I know Daniel shared a picture earlier of the Emirates network ops room, but if you go to the crew control desk, you will now see large screen TVs all around the desks, each with different information on showing situational awareness, the standby situation, what flights we have in open time, what crew have checked in, all of our critical flights and those sort of things, which we've built over this period of time. We've also built a lot of tools for automatic recrewing, for suggesting where they are, for reserve allocation and things like that. And the next real steps we're going to take is we're dipping our toe into the generative AI pool to look at swapping capability and suggestions for crew. The only thing that is a worry is looking at bidding and that sort of thing, because crew still expect that when they bid for something, they will get it. And the issue with that is it's an optimizer. The first rule is to cover your flying program. After that, if it can assign bids, then all well and good. And as soon as you put some sort of generative AI in, the crew will start to assume that the system is going to give them what they want. But modern technology is something that we are grasping with one hand, and I think holding a bit at arm's length. There are some areas, I've seen projects for. My favorite one was entitled Autopilot Ops, and the concept behind it was looking at whether it was possible to have one person in an operations room running the whole airline, just using situational awareness tools. Obviously, Daniel being from IBS, they've built a lot of, they call it widgets. It's a term that you will hear a lot in their presentations, but these sort of widgets, like back in the 90s, Fokker came out with the dark cockpit concept, where everything is off unless something is going wrong, and that's how all of these widgets work. And the software companies are also progressing with the same sort of thing. So everything is fine until it tells you something is wrong. But again, the concept is the issue there, that my concern, and I'm a big believer in technology, I push a lot of initiatives through, and I spend probably 90% of my time looking at ways that we can introduce technology to improve the operation, because we don't want to be back in the pre-COVID days or even earlier, where you have 20, 30 crew planners and your office is 100+ people to try and manage an operation. The fewer the better, if possible, but you still have to be wary of overuse of technology in the event that something fails. We all remember what happened with BA a few years ago, where they had an issue with their data center and they stopped flying. And these are the sort of risks that technology will introduce. And of course, you see in the news all the time about hackers and malware and ransomware and those sort of things. In fact, quite a big software company, I think, had some sort of issues with it in the past few years. So it has to be a concern. So you have to, as I said, grasp technology, but hold it at arm's length at the same time. But when I look back at where I was and when I first started, we don't have flying cars like everybody claimed we were going to have, and those sort of things. Air taxis are being touted in Dubai. Flying around in some sort of electric taxi that will pick you up at home and drop you off wherever and fly above all the traffic, which is a great thing. We have self-driving cars, and the concept that maybe we could have planes without pilots, but I've never actually met anybody who get on one, because they are the last line of defense, and love them or hate them, we need them, unfortunately. The biggest concern, I think, in the aviation industry going forward is not really technology, though. It is just resources. I think everybody here will know that future growth and the plans of airlines and the actual pilot market is getting very diluted. I don't know what statistically the requirement is for pilots over the next 5 years. I know what we need. I'm obviously not at liberty to share that, but I speak to other airlines who need hundreds of pilots, 500-600 pilots in the next year, thousands over the next few years to incorporate their growth. And we have a very major player coming into the market down the road as well. So technology has to go hand in hand with that. We incorporated over the years when I first started, fatigue was not something we ever considered. Cosmic radiation was a myth. I'm not sure it's exactly proven science or anything, but it is a requirement now. But fatigue has become a very big factor, and there's been a lot of work towards moving away from prescriptive FTLs and trying to work on a fatigue-based rostering system. But I don't know about everybody else, but there's not a huge amount of headway on that. Although scientifically, that would be the way to go. The FTL schemes we use were developed in the 60s, 70s, those sort of things, and they are, a lot of them are outdated. Some of the basic concepts of it, they don't look at the work-life balance. They just look at, these are the rules and you'll stick to them. So yeah, we're concentrating a lot more on fatigue now than we ever used to, especially with ultra range operations, flights of 18 hours plus and that sort of thing, stretching the boundaries of the actual aircraft operations. And it is a long time to be sat on a plane, but it's also a long time for the crew as well. What do I see coming? Sorry?
Peter, I have a question. Talking about this technology 30 years, 20 years, 10 years ago, and you were saying we were trained in a certain fashion. We knew what's going on and so on. Would you see that there was a larger openness for new technology because you had pen and paper, and nowadays, having made the experience with a couple of IT systems in the past, people are a little bit more reserved for another wave of technology? Or is exactly the other way around, that now younger people come to airlines, that technology is much more open, perceived as something improving lifestyle also of the crew planner?
Absolutely the opposite, Daniel. I remember going from a paper-based system to a computerized system, and it was like taking away somebody's favorite blanket or cuddly toy from them. They would literally hold on to the rosters. They didn't want to give them up. That's the way they did it. That's the way they were used to it. Everybody nowadays has a mobile phone. People spend all their lives on their mobile phones, with technology, so they're used to it. I think moving from one system to another is different. Moving to a different way of doing things is more difficult because we're still human beings. We are stuck in our ways. And with moving from, I didn't move around airlines. I mean, I spent 10 years at my first one, and unfortunately only left due to September 11 and what happened with that. But after that, I did move around a bit. And the first thing you learn is that there are different ways of doing things. So it opens your mind up to how people do the job. Everybody did it in the same direction and with the same sort of rules, but they did things differently. It's the roster. I showed the roster to start off with. We used to do 2 lines on the roster and cross one out and do the other one, whereas the second airline I went to was yellow stickers, and every airline was doing it in a slightly different way, but still the same way. We moved over from one rostering system to our current rostering system, and the first thing people said is, well, it looks different. I had it in a previous airline where we moved from one crew management system to another, and the first thing people said was, can you keep the same colors? Can you make it look like the old system, even though it works very differently? Because we're creatures of habit. We're used to doing things the same way. There is and I don't know what the generations are. I mean, I'm an old dinosaur, so I don't know what's Gen Z and those sort of things. But there are these people who are fully absorbed in technology. The way that the generative AI, the chat GPTs of this world have taken off has been phenomenal. But I think a lot of people around the world are going, especially in technology, are going, whoa, hang on a minute. We need to slow down on this and understand it before it goes too far, because it has this ability to take data and sort of analyze it and present it. And I was reading an article recently about what not to use AI for. So what not to use Siri on your phone or whatever it is, depending on the brand you use, you know, and it says, don't use them to say, how do I perform CPR and things like that. But people do, because they have the technology at their fingerprints and at their fingertips. And we have to be careful about rushing headlong into technology, but we should also embrace it at the same time, introduce it. And that's what we're trying to do at the moment, is slowly introduce these sort of things to make the experience better whilst having it under our control. You look at it, generative AI is great for certain things, but have you ever tried one of these chatbots when you're trying to talk to your bank or something like that? They are so frustrating. Yeah, you ask it a question, it answers another one. And it never gives you the answer you're looking for. And you can spend hours and then at the end of it, it'll go, thank you very much, goodbye. And it's like, you haven't told me what I wanted to know. And these are the issues with rushing too fast into technology. We should embrace it, but we should also understand that these things will take time.
By the way, I'm still seeing the Microsoft Windows screen. You have something more? Or
No. I just have onto a question and answer. I was just, it was like I said, this is I do a lot of work on technology, but when it comes to PowerPoints and that, I am very much.
Yeah, but then maybe stop screen sharing and then we see everybody in the call.
Yeah, okay. How do I stop? There we go. That's the thing. Okay. Yes, now I can see people. But yes, it's this is technology is fantastic. How we've moved along in the past 30 years, and it's not, as I said before, it's not like the Jetsons where we've got flying cars and that sort of thing. It's not like Back to the Future, but we are moving forward. We have cars that self-drive. Yeah, I mean, I don't have a fancy Tesla and things like that, but my car pretty much drives itself. I stick it on cruise control. It corrects me if I go out of the lane. It slows me down before I get too close to the car in front and those sort of things. So it's very much has its own technology in it, and we should embrace these as we go forward with aviation. But use them to help us, use them to assist us, and let's not get away from the basic skills of being able to understand the roster and being able to see where there are issues, because if we don't, then we'll end up with problems where the system had a bit of a bug.
Okay, you have a question.
We didn't know how to follow. Yeah.
Yeah, and I'm just thinking, what will be that happy medium between having optimizers and, running PBS where you shouldn't, I guess, interrupt or manually adjust rosters, and what you're mentioning of, losing that ability of knowing what's good and what's not, because nowadays it's mostly sort of, looking at quality, I don't know, balancing certain things for the distribution is done, but it's not that you go through in a specific roster because of the volume that we manage today, and maybe the different system that we have in order to optimize already. What will be that happy medium between the technology that we have today and actually not losing that knowledge?
It's a very difficult question to answer. It's trying to instill into people the skills. We're never going to be able to go away from optimizers, because optimizers they do things that we physically can't. Yeah, when you're trying to, if you tried to manually write rosters for 20,000 plus crew, you'd need a team of 100 people sitting writing rosters, and that's all they would do. And they would write a small portion of it. You can't do it all together. In fact, there are very few optimizers on the market that can do this all together. It's all about quality checks and understanding when building the roster initially, understanding the rules that you're putting into it. Because everybody has a requirement. There's the company requirement from the perspective of we need to cover the flying program. We need to keep the costs down to a minimum and that sort of thing. But we still have to take into account the crew's requirement, their lifestyle balance. We've been doing a lot of work on that sort of thing to try and give crew a better balance on their lifestyle, purely because we know what a volatile market is. It's a buyer's market at this moment in time. Yeah, and it's the same for pilots and cabin crew, although pilots are a richer commodity from the fact that they are more difficult to get, harder to train, more costly to train. And I won't say that. That'll get me into trouble. But they are a commodity, and they know they are. It's a buyer's market at the moment. People are coming out, airlines are coming around. So you have to look at what you can do to get the balance between the requirements of the airline and the requirements of the crew. And we've been putting a lot of effort into trying to get that balance on top of everything else and the requirements we have as a business to ensure that we keep our operating costs, our crew costs to a minimum, that we don't have to have too much excess in the system to be able to roster it, and we take everything into account. So it's a very, very difficult balance to get. I think what I'm trying to instigate, and I would like to see more of, is training people more basically to start off with. When we first introduced the full computer suite back in 98, 99 or whatever it was, the first thing we did was we took people into a classroom and we spent a week with them going through every aspect of the system. When they came into the company, we taught them all the basic information that I was taught when I joined, so they came in with a skill set. Now you see airlines is more, you come in the door, you get a bit of basic training, then it's very hands-on, it's on the job training. And as we all know, the situations you get are never the same. So maybe going forward, we could use AI and all of this technology we have to start recording these scenarios and building them into a training package, which would significantly help lift the skill set of the users. I'm not saying the users aren't skilled; they are very skilled, but they don't have that basic ability that us old dinosaurs used to have of going, that doesn't look right.
Peter, I think this is a very interesting topic now, because also when you look back in history, when you were meeting the first optimization technology vendors and so on. When we talk about optimization, we quickly talk with mathematicians, engineers who have a very clear understanding what is the optimal solution for certain parameters and so on. And then they meet people from the crew scheduling or the operations control, and they are not all mathematicians. So do you see there a mismatch of the languages each party is talking? Maybe people from an airline also feel overwhelmed from the amount of information talk, and how is it explained? Is this maybe necessary to bridge exactly both what from the engineering and the academics and the real practice that technology can really help the people on the ground?
Yeah, I think there's a huge mismatch, Daniel. I mean, I've been dealing with systems and have implemented a lot, both from I did a couple of years consulting, but also from a business side of it. And even I have to tell our IT guys, hang on a minute, guys, can you explain that to me in real English? Because I don't understand what they're talking about when you see all this technical speak. I think also, whilst the technology has accelerated there, and some companies have done it exceptionally well, but I've seen other companies which have sort of slightly fallen behind, have not taken business involvement in their development as they go forward. I know yourselves went out and did all your redevelopment using airlines as a platform to build what the airlines need, and I think that is a key to go forward, to sit down with the airlines and understand what the airline, because we're all different. I look around the room and everybody's different. Everybody works for a different airline. They have different rule sets that they work to, both legislative and unions. I dare say unions because I'm at home. And those sort of things, and the requirements of the crew and the nature of the flying they're doing. Everybody is different. And to take that in, there's never going to be an ideal system for everybody. It will never be a monopoly. It won't become Windows, where they have a massive market share and that sort of thing, because everything needs to be adapted to meet it. But the way forward would be to take the airlines and get more of that information, and try, when you come to me, explain something to me as an ops person, not as a computer genius, because I'm far from it. You've seen from my PowerPoint presentation how fantastic I am with technology. I'm good at putting blocks together.
Good. Brian, you raised your hand.
How are you? Yeah, Peter, thanks very much for the talk. Some of the comments you made me wonder about whether you might see a future for some sort of license system or professional qualification system in the crew management space. Do you think that is a direction that would be worth pursuing for the industry, or have you any comment in that regard?
I think it would be. I mean, lots of other industries and facets of aviation have licensed users. It was something that in the UK we tried to do for the operations manager and the crewing managers and those sort of things. Tried to get together, and they had meetings regularly to try and build something that was a sort of semi-unofficial qualification. So the UK Ops Managers Association used to run a course a couple of times a year where people went and actually got a qualification in the operation side of it, and part of that was crew. And I think it'd be a very good thing to have. The only issue would be all of the different regulations you have in different countries, and that's the thing. So it would have to be very, very basic, the baseline of it. And to go, and you've got FAA rules, and you've got EASA rules, and you have different rules in different countries, throwing the union agreements. I mean, I think the last count, BA had 7 pilot unions agreements the last time I heard. I don't know how many they have now, but those sort of things to build them in, so you could teach the basic qualifications and the basic concept of rostering, but to actually give them an overall qualification like an FAA dispatcher's license would be a bit more difficult. But I think it's a very good idea if you could put something together, Daniel. That could be your new line of work.
Philip, you raised your hand, and then next is Shane.
You mentioned earlier that there is a misunderstanding between the ops guys and the business people. I think the right wording there is that there is not a common view on what actually is a problem. Mathematics, or the math guy tend to solve a mathematical problem, which has a distinct solution. So yeah, there is something like the best solution, while the big art is to express the business problem into a mathematical equation. The more interesting question is so you mentioned that some years down the road, it was possible that you look at a roster and you see that's good, that's bad. Do you think in the world which has significantly increased in complexity with regulations on acclimatization, fatigue, cumulative limits over different rolling and fixed periods, different contracts applicability, it is even doable that a roster, even the highest skilled human machine, could look at a roster and say that's a legal one or not? Or should we not face it and say we must put the energy into making the software down to or up to 99.999 solid?
There are certain things you're never going to be able to see. Yeah, you're never going to be able to, in your head, work out how many duty hours, block hours, whatever a crew member has over a period of time. But you should be able to look at a roster and say, you know what, that day off is not legal because it's not 34 hours long. He doesn't have 2 and 14. There's not 8 days there, and those sort of things. But as the regulations have changed, we're tracking things over much wider periods. Now, when I go back to how we did things manually, we had a very basic crew record system, which would calculate the days off, and we, with union agreements and that sort of thing, we never got close to the 1828 rules or the average 1828 rules. So that was never an issue. We were only comparing 2 weeks. At the moment, our DevOps system shows 32 days in a format that's actually readable. I think it can go higher, but in a readable format, you're looking at 32 days. You can't pick everything up. It is impossible for us to calculate every single thing. And the same with when you look at all of the entry regulations, the visa requirements, the training requirements, and all these sort of things that we have on top of what we do as well. You know, when you're flying a global operation, there are so many other country regulations, you know, some very strange ones that I've never understood, but we get them all the time, different countries. So we should be focusing on that, Philip. I agree, and nice to see you after a long time. But there still has to be the basic skill set. That's the thing. If technology fails, if your DevOps system went down, how long could you continue to function? And that's the big question I think we have to ask ourselves. And that's, you know, I'm putting a lot of effort into that at the moment to try and get us to that point where we could manage for 24 hours plus, because it's a big ask. And technology, you know, the way the world is changing and that sort of thing is a great thing, but it's only as good as actually having power in your mobile phone. You know, having a mobile phone is a wonderful thing, but it has a battery in it and the battery runs out. The internet dies. These sort of things. If you rely too much on technology and you put every effort into it, what do you do when the technology is not available?
Shane, you raised your hand and will give us the answer on the doomsday, how we manage this.
Oh, I don't think I can answer that question. I did, Peter, pick up on your comment about how, you know, the current generation, the next generation of professionals in the crew planning world don't often understand the schedule and don't spend enough time investing on the schedule. And you know, got me thinking around often new recruits into those departments are often coming from the operation, right? So crew scheduling or the operations control center, you know, and they tend to move into that area. And I'm wondering from yourself or from others on the call, like, are we spending enough time maybe leveraging our relationships with network planning and the commercial teams and you know, opportunities to cross-pollinate between the groups to bring that knowledge base from the scheduling side, the commercial scheduling side, over to an operational type of role like in crew planning, and vice versa. And you know, it's a big focus for myself is trying to bridge the relationship and bridge the lines of communication with our commercial teams, especially as the strategy is changing within our organization. But I guess I'm curious your thoughts on that.
I've tend to find over time that crew staff tend to go the opposite way. They tend to come into an operational role. We have had a lot of crew coming in and things like that. Cabin crew tend to make quite good crew schedulers, just because they've got an experience of the actually flying the operation and those sort of things. But they also have that sympathetic side that they beat out of you very early when you work in crew control. Sympathy towards crew. But what I've tend to find is they go the other way. We have very close relationships with our network planning department, just because we have to, and our flying program doesn't change that much. But from the very beginning, there's a very close relationship between the two. But I've always found that staff tend to go the other way because operations tends to be 24/7. And people, as they get older, want to go and get a quieter life with no night shifts and weekends off and all those sort of things. But I think it's very important that there is there, and it's very important that there is operational and crew input to the building of the schedule. When I first went to a low-cost carrier, they just split off from the parent airline, and their flying program was, on paper, was fine, but it wasn't practical. It was, you know, your aircraft left 7 o'clock in the morning. They all got back at 11 o'clock at night, and they had 25-minute turns all day, which looks great and commercially is fantastic. But as soon as you run late, that's it. Your whole day is gone. And as head of ops, when I was getting phone calls at 2, 3 o'clock every morning, it sort of got a bit tedious. So there has to be that involvement, and there has to be, I would say, more of a leveraging it the other way, taking the people, getting the experience, and then moving into the commercial areas where they can put their operational experience into the flying program would be the better way to go.
Okay, you raised your hand.
Yeah, just a quick comment on Shane's question. And here in Avianca, our long-term planning, crew planning team has been building that bridge with the commercial area. In like today, commercial team knows what's the block time per day and what's the minimum they need to target and whatever they're, kind of imagining for the future. And each time they're trying to make a change or cancellations in the same matter as, I don't know, the passengers protection and the guys from the aircraft have to give an okay. Also from the crew area, we need to give an okay. So yeah, that's an advantage, or at least some kind of improvement that we have got in terms of communicating and at least understanding each other's. But I do think that your comment is so important because it's not only with commercial area, it is with so many areas that we need to build these bridges. And we're so busy that, sometimes we do not have enough, or we do not take enough time to do so. And at the end, we end up having different mathematical problems, not understood the same, or at least the previous comment that we cannot translate our problem into a mathematical solution in the same way. We're trying to solve or pull in the car to different sides.
Claire, you raised your hand.
Well, first, thank you, Peter, for this presentation. It's interesting to get the perspective all the way back to pencil and paper for how the job was done. I did some paper when I started in 2000, but computers were already being used fairly heavily. So it's interesting to hear the history behind it. My question is around, if you could offer one piece of advice or wisdom to someone entering the profession of crew management, what would you tell them?
No 2 days are the same, especially if you're working in crew control. You can build on your experience, but there is no guidebook to it. So we talked earlier about having a qualification and that sort of thing, but there's no guidebook to this. Your experience builds and builds and builds, but there's no. You sort of have to throw it all into a bucket and then try and pull out the bits that are relevant, because no two situations are ever the same. It's not like a crossword puzzle where there is a set answer. There are many. We have a saying in the UK: there are many ways to skin a cat, which is probably not politically correct nowadays, but the saying is there, and basically it means there are different ways to carve up a problem. And the most important thing, I think, when it comes to crew management is the ability to think around a problem and think outside the box. That's what I would say. Start working on your logical thinking and how to bring your experience together to find the answer that is not always obvious to start off with. In the future, when technology gives all of this when technology gives you all the answers, that's a different matter. But again, if technology doesn't actually work, you still have to go back. You cannot beat good old-fashioned experience, is what I say. You seriously can't.
Thank you.
There are already some nice comments on your cat statement in the chat notes. I will not respond on it, but it was spot on.
Yeah, and
any further questions from the audience?
I can see Shane's answer as well. Yeah, learn different parts of the business. Very, very important. we're not in isolation. Operations is not the be all and end all. You have to really progress and really make the right decisions. You have to understand all facets of the business, not just the bit that you do.
Aditi, you raised your hand earlier and then you dropped it. Okay, there she is again.
Yes. Hi, Peter. Hi, Daniel. Hi, everyone. Thank you, Daniel, again for organizing and convincing Peter to do this for us. And thank you, Peter, for once again enlightening us with all the information, like always.
He asked me for 10 cats. I had to provide him the cats. So obvious mistake.
Absolutely. And Peter manages to convince us each time with whatever he's explaining. So yet again, he's done that. So Peter, I would want to understand. So previously, I raised my hand more to understand that you spoke so much about technology, and over the years, as far as I've also experienced, the way that we teach our schedulers has changed. So eventually, like you mentioned, there's going to be AI usage and simulations and everything. How do you think we can train our schedulers and our crew management people and our ops controllers in a manner that they work more efficiently in a cohesive manner? Because there's a lot about training crew schedulers differently and ops controllers differently, but a lot of what they do is actually correlated. So how do we work also on the correlation of the two features to like complete the puzzle in the day of ops, really?
I think this is a way in which we can use technology to its fullest to do it. We're seeing not only AI, but things like Meta and stuff like that, these virtual reality universes coming in. So why could we not develop a virtual ops room? You bring people in, you take them, and they do exercises outside of it. And this would be a good way to use generative AI. Take your flying program, sit them down there in a virtual world, and then get the Gen AI to say, okay, this has happened, that's happened, and actually generate scenarios, because it will do it based upon historic events. If I go and build a scenario, I have to think, okay, and I've done some for interviews this week actually, and going down and filling out scenarios, and you have to sit and think about it. Gen AI has the capability to look back over thousands and thousands of days of data and looking at things that happened and picking out problems. And, you know, hindsight is always 20/20. You can look at a problem and go, well, why didn't you do that? And why didn't you do this? We can all do it, but you have to take the person on the day. But why don't we build a virtual environment and use AI to go, okay, this scenario here, let me throw that at them. You see it on, I remember seeing it on a movie where they were training people in spaceships, and they had these sort of exercises there, which were used to train the commander decisions of people. And why could we not bring that technology in and really use what we're getting now to say, you sit there, you have an ops person, you have a crew person, you have your flight dispatchers and everything, and we put them in a room and we go throw scenarios at them and let the computer do it for them. Let the AI generate a scenario and see what they come out with and grade them on that. It should build better decision making, and it will prepare them for the future. That's my view on it. That's a good way of using technology.
Yeah, I'm sure Daniel is listening to that.
I think the first step to evolve is to have more of these sessions, because everybody here in the audience is potentially thinking, oh, okay, I'm not the only one having these issues. And this is a little bit calming down and relaxing. I think then the next step is exactly to share best practice. We are currently working on this project Genesis, where we exactly want to share commonalities and help other new joiners to the industry to learn from the experts in the past. And then, of course, then the next step is to bring this to the technology providers who translate it into technology. I often hear artificial intelligence. I'm also using ChatGPT a little bit more here and there. But I think the human intelligence is still spot on and is ahead of artificial intelligence. Because if you're not understanding whether the response from the artificial intelligence is making sense or not, you may be relying on something which has been not well trained from the engineers. My
That's
two
true. And
cents. on that.
I had a follow-up question as well. Peter, you mentioned that you've been able to successfully manage that a 24-hour period can be managed without the use of technology. I would just like to understand a little more on it. That how did you prepare for this 24 hours and how did you go about doing this?
I can't give away any trade secrets, but we've built a lot of systems around it, which gives us more information, and we're using some machine learning and rudimentary artificial intelligence, which will be able to pull the data for us out of from the state it was. So we have the database there. Obviously, all of our systems sit on top of a database. We dump that into our reporting system. It has a lag of 30 minutes, which we're trying to get down to 10. And it dumps it into there. And then we've built this tools. We've got a very big data science team who built us some tools to be able to analyze that and pull and give us some decision-making support. So it's not nailed down yet. It's still work in progress, but we are probably 75% of the way there. We can talk about it offline, Aditi.
Perfect. That's a good one.
I thought you were going to say you had a magic bag of yellow stickers, Peter.
Oh no!
I was
Please,
wondering, are
I've
they
seen enough
really
of those for
setting
my
their
lifetime.
schedulers already on 24 hours?
No. This is just decision support tools in the event that we have to. Business continuity has become a very, very big thing and a much bigger priority. Now we've got to that point of technology where it is so entrenched in what we do that we have to spend more time on business continuity, because I think everybody learned from what happened to BA, and it was extremely unfortunate. But just for something that was relatively simple, they stopped flying for how long? And I've seen it in other airlines as well. I remember in the days when EasyJet introduced a new pairing system, which built pairings that were totally impractical, but were financially viable and the best way to do it. And I think they managed till about 10 o'clock in the morning before they stopped flying for a day and a half. Because anybody with experience, and this is where I say about relying too much on technology, anybody with experience would sit and look at that and go, well, that's never going to work. But when you rely on the technology too much, this happens, and the accountants and that come in and go, no, this is going to save us millions. Yeah, but they stopped flying for a day and a half. This was quite a long time ago, but it was there, and that's where we have to embrace technology, but take it a step at a time and introduce it when we're sure it's going to work in the right way.
Thank you, Peter. I think this was a fantastic session about the evolution of crew management. Many questions show that there's a huge interest to understand more how technology was evolving over time, what are the challenges in our industry. Thank you that I could convince you, and maybe we can make a follow-up session also as part of the panel discussion. You were in the panel discussion for the Agiforce, where we were talking about the elephant in the room, and I think we can potentially do something very soon. Next month, we are talking about Formula One racing and what airlines can learn from Formula One racing. We just had a fantastic session today with a colleague from KLM, City Hopper. She was also convinced that airlines can learn a lot from Formula One. And Victor Gumans from Transavia is sharing his best practice. And if you have a colleague who is positive, smart, enthusiastic and upbeat, please kindly do the needful. Let she or her or him join Airline Crewing Enigma. And if you know somebody who should also share best practice, you can nominate a person. I'm just seeing somebody from Istanbul, but I'm also seeing somebody from Athens without making any pressure on you guys. But that would be nice, because you see, we can all benefit from each other. And of course, Alex, also you can share your best practice from your continent. Thank you very much, everybody, being with us today. And also thank you for all the questions. I'm going to share the recording tomorrow. And yeah, have a nice rest of the day or good night. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me.
Thank
Bye,
you,
everyone.
Peter. Thank you,
Enjoy the
Daniel.
rest of your day.
Bye. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye. Thank you.